Good morning, everyone, and thanks for joining me. Now, the topic for exploration here, as we say, is the role of the artist in the development of technology. But before we kind of delve into that knotty and complex subject, and for the benefit of those unfamiliar with either myself or the work of IOU, the organisation I work for, I'd like to give you guys a bit of information, history, backstory as to why the fields of art and technology might be pertinent or relevant or something that the organisation has some sense of authority or understanding of. Now, IOU is an organisation which next year celebrates its 40th anniversary, so it's currently 39 years of practising in the performing arts field, and that practice is multidisciplinary. We employ a variety of work, employing text and spoken word. We use music and sound pieces, we use sculpture and visual arts, and very occasionally we employ people and actors and give narrative-driven plays, but that's very rare. Now, recently, over the past 6 or 7 years, the organisation's output has kind of been classified in the field of hybrid art. Now, for those unfamiliar, hybrid art's definition, according to Wikipedia, so how much stock can we put into it, is a contemporary art movement in which artists work with frontier areas of science and emerging technologies. So I'm going to use science and technology as kind of synonyms for the next few minutes, which is broad, I understand, but you'll forgive me, because I'll hopefully be able to draw some parallels that will allow the original concept, the original kind of sentence to be explored in a little bit further detail. So with IOU as a hybrid arts organisation, what kind of work have we done? Now, a work in 2008, I believe, or 2009 that we did was called Airborne. And now that utilised scientific and domestic apparatus to emulate natural phenomena. And then we recorded the sound of that natural phenomena emulation and composed a sound piece in real time, manipulating those audio recordings. So, for example, in the field of tectonics or geological activity, we placed a weight on a domestic or a roof slate and waited 15 minutes for the slate to crack. The tension in the room was palpable. We also recently, I think 2010 or 11, did a work called Speaking Tubes. Now that used large kind of galvanized steel structures as sound resonators. They were placed in the round, and each structure had a kind of sound system within it. And an immersive multi-channel sound piece was created by composer Yanis Kyriakidis. And that piece itself was informed by some scientific research conducted by the BBC around something called a vortex cannon, but it's very detailed and very knotty, and if anyone's got any interest in those pieces of work or any other of IOU's work, I recommend you go to our website, ioutheatre.org, to check it out. Our latest piece of work, alongside Speaking Tubes, which also presented augmented reality back in 2010, was Totem One that we did last year. Now, this was an audiovisual and virtual reality laboratory where people could experiment and become immersed using positional sound and positional visual technology, equipment, objects, kit. But also we collaborated with the University of Huddersfield to create research-driven pieces for audiences to interact with. So IOU've been lucky enough to play with artists, to play with scientists and technologists, and to play with ideas more than anything. And with that information about IOU out of the way, I'd like to hold onto the subject of play, if I can, and develop some ideas that will hopefully inform our original statement when we eventually, I promise, go back to it. Now, I listened to the recent John Peel lecture, which was given by Mr. Brian Eno recently, and the subject matter was an examination of ecology and culture. Now, Mr. Eno suggested that as a society we implicitly understand the value of play in terms of its benefits to human and social development. None more so than in our childhood, where play often takes the form of imaginary games. Let's pretend, let's play house, or let's be a superhero, or go on a fantastical dragon flight, for example. Now, Mr. Eno suggested that the use of imagination allows very complex social scenarios to be played out, where subtle differences have potentially profound effects on the world and society around you. So an example would be the superhero. Now, in the imaginary game of superheroes, the world is pretty much as we see it. Gravity exists, although this character, our superhero, can transcend gravity, doesn't care about gravity. And the effects of that are that they may be able to go and save Big Ben from being terrorized by Dr. Doom or whoever is our baddie in this imaginary world. Now, what's worth noting here, Mr. Eno suggested, was that the imagination here is a safe space to extrapolate these consequences. It's a safe space to look at the world in a slightly different way, or to make a subtle change in variables of the world, and then be able to come back from it with our learning, with our information. So play allows the mental space to learn through the extrapolation of consequences. And Mr. Eno also suggested that it's the duty of art in adult society to reflect the world back at us. So the role of the artist is to use their media, the painting, the poem, the stanza, to change these variables, to create a parallel world, and allow us, in the safe space of the gallery, to reflect on this and be able to walk away from it with, hopefully, some learning. Now I'm going to end my plagiarism of the Peel lecture there, and hopefully take the ideas into a different arena, and hopefully again relevant back to our original topic. So the structure of safe learning through play, and changing small variables for subtle or profound effects, remind me quite quickly of the scientific method. And now there's many definitions of the scientific method, or many interpretations. This one comes from Scientific Research Publishing, and it's a method of inquiry based on measurable evidence subject to specific principles of reasoning. So bear with me, because I know there's a lot of, again, knotty things inside that. But if I can paraphrase that, in a safe laboratory, single variables can be changed under strict conditions to confirm or disprove a hypothesis. And that hypothesis is formed via an idea, and that idea is based on an imagining of the world in a certain way. Now, once these findings are demonstrable, either by being a completed set of stanzas for a poem, or an idea that's germinated and found its way onto the canvas, or if it's repeatable results in a scientific experiment, these findings are published for the world to see. But not only for the world to see, but in my sense, more importantly, for the rest of society to critique, to explore, and to build upon. So we kind of have a cycle within it. Now, I hope the notion of play as important in that sense of development has an equivalence, and I hope we can agree in the room in that the role of artistic practice and the role of scientific endeavour and technological pursuit can be seen as corollaries, can be seen as equivalents. Because now I'd like to return back to our original title, our original idea, which was the role of the artist in the development of technology, and I'd like to pick apart that idea, that concept, just for clarity's sake, so that we can kind of all know where at least I'm coming from, whether you agree or not. So what is an artist in this context? Now, for me, it's a generator, a creator of products, a creator of ideas, a creator of things. And technology, we kind of think of it as devices, objects, gear, kit. But for me, it's tools, but created by technologists, created by ideas, created by people. Development, I feel, kind of details progression. It details potentially improvement, either by incremental degrees or otherwise, but above all, it's about change. And a role is a standing, it's a relationship again, but it's almost given to you, it's almost reflected back from a person. A role encompasses a set of expectations that we're given by somebody else. So what we're really thinking about here is human relations, the role of a bag of meat who has synapses that create articulatable, often ideas, in the communication and development of change with another human being. So that if there was a question in there, which there isn't currently, but if there was, it would be, for me, how do we better relate to assist in the pursuit of our individual passions, our individual ideas? And those human relations, I believe, go beyond the creators, the producers, the artist, and the technologist. And they encompass the consumers, they encompass everyone else, so each and every one of us. Now, as producers, I work for an arts organisation, so I'd like to return to the subject of the publication, of how we present our findings, be they scientific or be they artistically driven, and how we present them, often challenging notions, often unsavoury pieces, in a deep, complex and sophisticated, yet ultimately a safe way. Again, I remember seeing my first Francis Bacon piece and kind of feeling a little bit sick to my stomach. But I could leave the gallery, I could walk away and leave that exploration of humanity behind, having learned something I felt, or having experienced something positively shocking at the time. Now, up until recently, the scope of our findings, or the scope of the publication, has been very limited. As a scientist or as a technologist, we might have been limited in our publication to impenetrable white papers, or to technical journals of which only a certain sector of society would feel comfortable going and purchasing from the newsagents. And as an artist, or as an arts engaged person, we might have to wait for a posthumous retrospective at a gallery. We might have to wait for an artist to die before we can go and see a broad enough impression of their work to give us the thread of their philosophy, to give us what they consider to be their impression and understanding of the world. But I think it's clear, and it's fine to say now that has all changed, and that's changed thanks to the advent of social media. And I do use the word advent, I think, appropriately. I mean, social media's been around a considerable amount of time now. We can count it in decades. But recently, you know, we're getting videos in our Twitter feeds. We're not linked to our 140 characters. We're not limited to our 140 characters anymore. A Facebook page or a hard catalogue of some work can have within it QR codes or NFC links to a Pinterest board of the inspirational material of an artist or of a designer. So we can see that cycle, and we're offered this information. And we're offered it at such a speed that it's truly mind-boggling, and we have to go through a process of personalisation to really be able to digest any of this information, to digest any of the responses that people, the artists, technologists, through our responders. To really digest their responses, we have to thin down what we want to see. We have to kind of explore and utilise a little bit of confirmation bias in the personalisation of the information that we receive. So if we're inclined, we can aggregate our individual interests, our musings on the world as we understand it, into a convenient and accessible format, like Flipboard, for example. I think it's a great example. Now, I'm not here to discuss the merits of convenience or otherwise. At the moment in society, I do believe that we're pioneers of a kind of blind social engineering at the moment, where the amount and the speed of data that's accessible and information and ideas that's accessible to us at the touch of a swipe of a screen is truly overwhelming. Arguments that can be kind of levied of laziness, apathy, cultural myopia are for another day, but there's no argument that certain structures and models are becoming defunct in this hyper-fast world of change. Financial models, ideas and concepts around intellectual property, and as recent kind of news features will inform us, ideas of free movement, identity, are starting to crumble and need to be reassessed. So we may be able to approach our ideas and our observations of convenience, maybe with caution, but hopefully with an open mind. And one thing is for sure, I believe, that thanks to urbanization, automation and globalization, in the very near future, we will, generally speaking, have more leisure time, more time to imagine, more time to reflect, and more time to respond to the things around us, creatively, in technological terms, scientifically. So in this connected world, comments, likes and retweets, we're giving responses to responses. The products of human inspiration and imagination are allowing us a further exploration of humanity via the same tool set. So whether we have a film with a mathematical bent inspiring mathematicians of the future, Darren Aronofsky's wonderful Pi here, or whether we have Lindsay's wonderful Fibonacci-driven art that can't fail to inspire thoughts about our nature, our planet, our role in the world. The inspiration cycle is constant, and we can't do anything about the impression that these responses have upon us and upon the world around us as we walk through it. Thank you. Now, I've kind of sped on a little bit, but in conclusion, I would like to return to our original subject, which is the role of the artist in the development of technology. And I think after kind of this thought trail for myself, I've come to the conclusion that it's a kind of reductive, defunct title, an unnecessary consideration, because as an artist, we may have a responsibility, but ultimately, it's as a human being and as part of society that we have a responsibility to imagine and to dream and to thus inspire others in their imaginations and dreamings. Because as an individual, to place the responsibilities of society on others is to devalue oneself ultimately and place an unnecessary barrier between oneself and others, thus depriving the world of our roles as fantastic Imagineers. That concludes it. Thank you very much indeed.
Very good, thank you.